just tell us a little bit more about viaNexus? You're using market data, you're feeding into AI. Data leakage is always a very big concern for the investment management industry or asset management industry. Please break it down for us. What's the value viaNexus is providing and the solution you have?
A year ago, three of us did an asset purchase from a US exchange called IEX, and we acquired 3 million lines of code. We've turned that into a huge big data platform that can onboard a wide variety of different types of data. And we normalize that data, and we were distributing that out through very fast APIs in the form of market data, real-time prices, fundamentals estimates, all the raw materials that you need. And some new technology came along called GenAI, and a big flaw in GenAI is the generative part. What you don't want as an asset manager is data from a model that's been assembled from the internet. You don't want your LLM to reach out to the internet and grab prices, because that data is not licensed for use in a professional workflow. So what we fundamentally solve for in the AI space is delivering fully licensed data directly to agents. And that might sound easy, but the whole licensing model that supported market data, which was really invented over the last 40, 50 years by exchanges, by big firms like Bloomberg, was predicated on large, bulk, bundled enterprise licenses, very often driven by the number of users in the company. The amounts of money that firms like BlackRock are spending on market data is astronomical. And of course, everyone's rubbing their hands thinking, hey, now we have a whole new slew of use cases. Agents are going to start consuming data. So our mission is really to change the dynamic there. And we've built a set of agentic services that sit on top of market data, on top of our platform, that entitle agents at the agent level to subscribe to and consume data. What that really means is the big issue around generative AI solutions and agentic solutions is hallucination. And a lot of solutions have been put in place when it comes to text-based content. But as I say, if you can't afford to not have a much more deterministic output when it comes to market data, and you see this issue with licensing kind of come to the fore with a lot of firms deploying agentic or chat-based solutions for their staff. So you're hearing about GPTs and co-pilots being deployed across enterprises that rightfully kind of mine the internal data of the company, that perhaps have access to a repository of internal research or maybe broker research, positions, other information. But if you were to ask any of those GPTs, what's the current price of any stock in my portfolio, the chances are that price is going to be either scraped from the internet if you've not designed your system well, or it'll be 15 minutes delayed or yesterday's price. So how can you have an agent or a co-pilot that's watching markets on your behalf if they don't have access to a real-time price? So we've built a real-time price, and that's available through our agentic services to anyone building a co-pilot or an agent. So you can ask that question of an agent, monitor the market, tell me when something unusual is happening, and when that happens, grab the news. Listen into that earnings call that coincides with the other earnings call that I'm listening to, and tell me if something is being said that's adverse to my position. You can't do that without having real-time access to data. So again, our mission is to, one, change the dynamic with the way data is distributed into asset management workflows, but actually to build that so it's future-proof, ready for this agentic world.
I'm curious to know, what other use cases does this potentially open up the door to that were never available before without the advent of GenAI and AI agents, right?
Well, I think the main one is as opposed to a much more kind of a proactive way of engaging with an LLM or GenAI solution where you're asking it a question, it's maybe doing some research or looking at that SharePoint repository. You can actually tell an agent, and you can actually vibe code and build an agent where the requirement is to actually go off and monitor a market, to actually be running in the background while you're doing your day-to-day job. So these autonomous agents, I think, are going to become more and more common. We don't really have them right now. We haven't given that autonomy, one through fear, one through the regulatory need to have the human in the loop. But the reality is the markets are moving so fast now, and they're so complex. And when I was an analyst, I could only really cover about 12 or 13 stocks. I was an analyst at UBS. And beyond that, I was into diminishing returns. Now I can actually write more research, I can cover more stocks, but I can't monitor those stocks. I can't watch the depth of the equities that I'm following. I'm not listening into Robbini, who's just been speaking, and triangulate and go, oh, he's just said something that's really important that impacts one of my stocks. So I think the notion of agents as true co-pilots, as opposed to a co-pilot helping you sift through that huge amount of data, I think that's where we're going. And based on the speed that we're getting there, it's kind of like next week. It's not a year or two out.